I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Let me see. And how many people do we have in here? I want to do my, let me see. Are you sharing your screen, Tatiana?
Yes, I
17.
will be.
Yeah, but I'm saying now, let me see.
Right now,
I'll
no.
share my screen. Now, Tatiana, you think we should go ahead and start in the interest of time?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Well, how's everyone doing? I'm as you were introduced to me before, I'm Akinyele Umoja. In fact, let me see. I have the wrong presentation up now, so let me get out of here right quick. And my co-host for this session is Tatiana Reyes. Tatiana is a community activist from Rhode Island. From Rhode Island, I was about to say Rhode Island, Maryland, from Rhode Island. And she is also a graduate student at Georgia State University, where she is studying the question of the history of women in the reparations movement. And she will talk to you more about that. We were to, this session is to talk about the United Nations decade and then how it relates to this question of reparations. So I'm gonna go ahead now that I have the right slide, is to share my screen. And then we're gonna have time here to break up, to have some discussion and to come back with some proposals for the group. So we left off talking about the International Decade of People of African Descent. And I'm gonna ask you to mute because if you don't mute, I'll hear this feedback and it will really distract me. And we talked about the Durban program of action, and we talked about how it called upon states to take appropriate and effective measures to halt and reverse the consequences of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, and genocide. And so one of the things that's been proposed in terms of states taking action is this whole question of reparations. And just to give you a definition, and I started using a little while ago, the definition of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. They state that reparations is a process of repairing, healing, and restoring a people injured because of their group identity and in violation of their fundamental human rights by governments, corporations, institutions, and families. Those groups that have been injured have the right to obtain from governments, corporations, institutions, or families responsible for the injuries that which they need to repair and heal themselves. Goes on to say, in addition to being a demand for justice, it's a principle of international law. As a remedy, it is similar to the remedy for damages in domestic law. You know, like if someone damages you, but like hitting your car or some other form of the violation that somebody's responsible, that holds a person responsible for injuries suffered by another when the infliction of the injury violates domestic law. So similar in international law as domestic law. And there's several forms of reparations. Oftentimes we just think properly of money, but there are several forms of reparations. Some don't include necessarily people receiving a cash payment. Restitution is one. And restitution, according to international law, is a reestablishment as far as possible the situation which existed prior to the commission of the internationally wrongful act. It is the primary form of reparations. You also have compensation that's provided when actual losses cannot be remedied by restitution, when it's not possible to bring people back to the exact same situation they had prior to the damage. There's rehabilitation, and that's provided when you were providing medical and psychological as well as legal and social services to bring about remedies. Other forms are satisfaction that addresses non-material losses, can include acknowledgement, like acknowledgement of the harm, expressions of regret, formal apologies, revision of historical accounts, because oftentimes the people who've been colonized or oppressed, their histories have been distorted, their identities have been distorted. Then commemorative events or monuments that speak to the harm that was created and also corrects the record. Finally, non-repetitions, that states must cease illegal actions and ensure that the actions will not occur. These are the forms of reparations that have that international law states. We should also say reparations is not a one-time event. It's generally a process of healing. When we think about healing, when we think about repair, it often doesn't happen in, split second. It doesn't happen through one event or action. It happens over a period of time. And so again, it's restitution, it's compensation, it's rehabilitation, it's satisfaction, and non-repetition. And again, this is stated by international law. I could put it in the chat later, the document that states these things. I'm gonna turn it over to Tatiana at this point, who will talk to you about the history, particularly since this is a women's organization, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, as well as the Fannie Lou Hamer branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. We want to look and highlight, because Black women in particular have played a significant role in the push for reparations. So I'm gonna stop sharing and have Tatiana share her screen and make her presentation to you. Let me stop my share. Okay.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Tatiana Reese. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As Dr. Amoja previously stated, I am a current graduate student in the Department of Africana Studies at Georgia State University. I'm interested in looking at the contributions of Black women in the current ongoing reparations movement, and in particular at the local level, at the city level, and just at the city level. So I'm going to do a brief overview of Black women who have contributed to the reparations movement in the first, second, and third wave. So we can start off with Belinda Royale. Belinda Sutton Royale was born in Ghana and was kidnapped and enslaved in Massachusetts. Once her master fled the country, Belinda petitioned the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for restitution, where she was awarded an annual pension of 15 pounds and 12 shillings. Unfortunately, she only received one payment and continued to petition the Commonwealth of Massachusetts until her death. And this was back in 1783. Sojourner Truth. So Sojourner Truth, as we all know, the great, circulated a petition requesting Congress to provide lands to the freed colored people in and about Washington to allow them to support themselves. Yet Truth's efforts were not successful. Former slaves in the United States got no land or financial support after the end of slavery, as we all know. Here we have Callie House, but before I would like to mention Callie House, I would like to discuss Henrietta Wood. Henrietta Wood won restitution for slavery back in the late 1800s. According to Caleb McDaniel, Henrietta Wood was born and enslaved in Kentucky and had been living as a free woman in Cincinnati. In 1853, when she was kidnapped and re-enslaved by a white Kentuckian named Zebulon Ward. She ended up living in slavery until after the Civil War. But in 1869, Wood returned to Cincinnati and filed a lawsuit against Ward for $20,000 in damages and lost wages. A federal court handed her a verdict of $2,500, an amount currently worth $60,000 US today. It is the largest known sum ever awarded by a US court in restitution for slavery. Callie House, the founder and support of the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief and Bounty and Pension Association, She was a formerly enslaved woman and challenged the United States to pay pensions to formerly enslaved Africans. By 1898, she enrolled 300,000 African Americans to demand pensions from the federal government. The association called for $15 per month and $500 in bounty for all formerly enslaved people over 70 years of age, with staggered and decreasing benefits for younger former enslaved who would still work. 6 enslaved pension bills went before Congress, none were passed. When organizing efforts were consistently being stopped by federal attacks, Callie House instigated and paid for a reparations lawsuit that called for the federal government to pay $68 million to African Americans out of the treasury that had been collected from cotton taxes between 1862 and 1868, which is just a span of 6 years. And this is just a brief photo of Henrietta Woods and a quick shot of her petition. And bring y'all to the GOAT, Queen Mother Audley Moore. Queen Mother Audley Moore presented a petition to the United Nations in the 1950s demanding land and billions of dollars in compensation, as well as repartition to Africa. She later published Why Reparations? Reparations is the battle cry for the economic and social freedom of more than 25 million descendants of African slaves. Queen Mother Moore formed the Reparations Committee of the United States Slaves with Dara Akumbakari. In 1962, they delivered a commute to the United Nations demanding that the United States government be forced to pay reparations. She is also known as the mother of the current reparations movement. Here we have Queen Mother Dorothy Benson Lewis. Dorothy Benson Lewis is the co-founder of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, also known as NCOBRA. NCOBRA was founded September 26, 1987, for the purpose of spreading information and supporting of the long-term goal of gaining reparations for African Americans. Founders of NCOBRA include National Conference of Black Lawyers, the New African Peoples Organization, and the Republic of New Africa. Although Queen Mother Dorothy was a co-founder of NCOBRA, she very much kept her ears and heart attuned to the reparation struggles on the continent of Africa and other parts of the diaspora. Deidre Farmer Paleman led a major lawsuit seeking billions in reparations in the early 2000s against railroad firms and insurance companies and banks, including Athena, Brown Brothers, and the Fleet Boston. This lawsuit was filed on behalf of 35 million African Americans. This here is Alderman Robin Rue Simmons. Alderman Robin Rue Simmons of Evanston, Illinois, successfully passed a reparations plan for residents of Black ancestry in Evanston. This reparations plan focuses on distributing $10 million in reparations for housing programs. Evanston, Illinois, with the lead of Alderman Robin Rue Simmons, became the first city in the nation with such a plan. Here we have California Secretary of State, Shirley Weber. Shirley Weber launched a reparations task force that is currently active and meeting as of last week. California Assembly Bill 3121 establishes the task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans, with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. The purpose of the task force is to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans, to recommend appropriate ways to educate the California public of the task force findings, and to recommend appropriate remedies in consideration of the task force findings. And lastly, we have Congresswoman Shayla Lee. Shayla Lee has continued and continues to push a historical effort to reintroduce legislation HR 40. In her first act of the 117th Congress, U.S. Rep. Shayla Jackson Lee, Democrat of Texas, this week reintroduced legislation that would fund a commission to study and develop proposals for providing reparations to African Americans. The commission shall examine slavery and discrimination in the colonies and the United States from 1619 to the present and recommend appropriate remedies. So this is just a brief overview of women in the reparations, Black women specifically in the reparations movement and their contributions. This does not cover most of the city level ongoing and individual efforts. There's always just a reminder that Black women are always at the forefront leading the way in the reparations movement.
And thanks for that, Tatiana. And you can see really the history of the reparations movement. Black women are at the center of the movement and leading the movement. I want at this point, just to lead you into having some discussion, we wanted to guide the discussion in two basic areas of just looking at things we could do and the organization could do around the question of reparations. And I must share my screen again. Tatiana brought up about Sheila Jackson Lee, Congresswoman. And we will say about HR 40, it initiates in 1989, and it took 20 years to have a real hearing and discussion in the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee. It passed. It got out of the Judiciary Committee finally after 20 years. And now I think there are 193 sponsors. They need another 20 sponsors to ensure that it will pass the House of Representatives. So one of the things we want to see is what can we do to make sure that HR 40 passes. Right now, you can see the language there is to address fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and in the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865. That's the period of time of slavery. To establish a commission to study and consider a national apology and a proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery. Okay, and it also will seek remedies. It's also going to look at de jure and de facto segregation. You know, that's segregation in fact or by law in the United States, and what impact that might have had. Then impact on continued institutionalized racism, and then make recommendations to Congress. So it will be a commission formed to make this examination at this time. Okay, and again, it's very close. So what can we do to ensure that we get more votes? I see someone raise their hand. I'm gonna come to you in a second. And then the other question we want to discuss is what can we do on a local level to promote reparations in our cities and counties? We actually want to divide you into further groups if that's possible, so we can do this. So local level, Tatiana talked about what happened in Evanston, Illinois, and there are other local initiatives going on in communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma. I know in Amherst, Massachusetts, there's been one in Asheville, North Carolina. I know where in Decatur, Georgia, there's an initiative being discussed. So what can we do on a local level? And then in other communities, it's just been something as simple as people getting their county commission or city council to approve, to endorse HR 40 on a national level. So I think there are a few questions before we break. Am I correct? Let me see. I thought it was a question or a hand, two participants raising their hands before we break. Maybe you can, and I can't see right now what their hands are. Tatiana, can you see their hand? Who raised their hand? Maybe I should stop sharing and then I could see.
You see now? I see
Okay,
Claudia.
I can see now. I see, oh Lord, I think I lost you right quick. Can you see them, Tatiana?
Yes, I see three. I
Can
don't
you
know which
call them out?
order. So Claudia, Waikisha, and Betty.
Claudia, can you go? Tell us your question. Okay, Waikisha, we're gonna move on since we're not hearing from Claudia.
Okay, good afternoon, and we having some bad weather, so if I'm breaking up, forgive me.
Yeah.
I am in Atlanta, and I have been watching the reparation study over in California, and so I want to know what can I do to help just start the conversation, because we don't even really have a large conversation here in the city of Atlanta. We have Black leadership here, but I have not ever heard anyone mention in the state of Georgia, I'll be fair, anything about reparations. So what could I do to help get that conversation going or kickstarted?
It's interesting you say that, because in Georgia, I mean, they're having a conversation in California, and Georgia actually had slavery and had a long period of lynchings and had legal segregation. So no, I think that's important, Waukesha. Well, why don't we keep that over to the side? I can connect with you here, and we could discuss what you could do here, but why don't we park that to what we could do? Well, you know, for the conversation. I don't want to answer it now to take up everybody's
That's
time.
fine.
Hear what
Thank
others
you.
do. But we're gonna make note of that, of what you said, and come back to it. And then I want to talk to you later, since I'm in Georgia also. Claudia, can you unmute and
I'll
talk
leave
to
my
her?
email in the chat as well.
Oh, very good. Claudia, can you unmute? Okay, well, then we're gonna go to Betty.
Yes, hello, thank you. Yeah, I'm from San Francisco, and I just, it really wasn't a question. It was more just to let people know that you can add San Francisco to the list of establishing a task force on reparations. It's been in existence a few months. I need to look more into it. But you know, we here in San Francisco, other members of WILF, I'm going to, you know, let people know, and we'll try to follow what they're doing. They, you know, any task force has public meetings, so we certainly can attend the meetings and see what they're going to do. But they will be making recommendations to the mayor of San Francisco and the Board of Supervisors to, you know, a formal report will be given with recommendations here in San Francisco. So we're lucky we have both San Francisco and, of course, the state of California. I don't know what other cities in San Francisco, I mean, in California have a task force. But anyway, I just want to let you know that. Yeah.
Are you calling on people?
You're muted, Dr. Moja.
I am calling on people, I'm sorry. I wanted to give Claudia a chance because she's had her hand up for a while, and then going to Alan.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, this is Mama Fatima, Brother Akageli.
Hey, okay.
Your long lost sister from California that you met in California. And I am at the present time the national co-chair for in COBRA's membership commission.
Very good.
And one of the things that we are very concerned about doing is setting up coalitions to get HR 40 passed. I mean, it's just not enough numbers yet. Yes, it's okay to push the politicians, we're supposed to, but there's two things that politicians respond to: money, then people, in that order, and we have to have at least the people. The other thing that's concerning me, just on a practical level, on how this is coming together, is that there's a gap between our Black professionals and politicians and well-to-do, but not enough information is coming down to the streets. Most people don't even understand what's going on. Like the young lady was saying sister was saying about Atlanta, the city of Fulton itself, the whole city just joined in COBRA to try to get HR 40 passed. This happened a few months ago.
Yeah, that was the city of South Fulton.
Yeah, South Fulton, excuse me.
And they gave a proclamation on that day, and that's one element we're in touch with, yes.
Yes, so, and then people are setting up, well, the sister that's doing that wonderful job in California has a task force that's open, but some people across the country, particularly in the South, they're setting up closed task forces. That is strategically bad, because what happens is the people who are already in control, particularly European Americans, pick which Negroes they want to work with that fit their comfort zone. So
Fatima,
as
I'm gonna
yes,
ask you to keep your comment brief so we can get more participants in.
okay, I'm basically done, but don't forget the National Black Human Rights Coalition. Say something about that, because that preceded in Cobra. It preceded everything that's going on now. Mario Badelli was just so visionary in his thinking. So please say something about our coalition, about our National Black Human Rights Coalition.
And that was something that Fatima mentioned that she and I both were involved in. It included people like Queen Mother Moore, Mario Badelli, Chokwe Lumumba. That's some of our history. And last time Teresa asked me to speak, I did more of a history, but I have less time today, so I wanted to really get us on some of the initiatives you mentioned, as well as what the first question person asked. But I think, Claudia, are you unmuted? Because we went past you a couple of times, and then I'm gonna come to Alan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm particularly interested in the breakout about how to get this local. That Michigan has, it has a reputation of being the one state in the United States that actually voted for George Wallace for president back when he was running as an independent. So we're less progressive than sometimes is projected. But I'm interested, can there be in the chat a connection with the material that I could give to our Congress people to entice them into signing on as sponsors, and the list of who are the sponsors, so I can check through the congressional people from Michigan and particularly in the Southeast area. So if that material could be in the chat, that I and others could make use of to contact our congressional people to get more sponsors to the HR 40.
That sounds good. Thanks for that, Alan. And we could also put you in touch with people who are at least in Detroit to coordinate with them.
Yeah, please do.
Very good, very good. I see, and Tatiana, you watching us on time? How much time have we spent so far? Because I know this session is supposed to be 20 minutes, and I'm taking notes of some of the suggestions.
We've been told we have 10 minutes left.
10 minutes
There was a
left.
note.
Okay, so we were going to break y'all up, but I'm gonna just continue in this manner, and then Tatiana and I'll sum it up. So I think I saw a hand from Regina Sneed.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to, California has a reparations commission. They've had, I think their last meeting was this past week in December. It is an excellent resource. I've looked at all the material they've had they've had testimony already from national witnesses. So if anybody needs to, is going to be holding testimonial hearings in their state, take a look at what's already available there and what speakers you might get. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of good material out there. We're fortunate because Dr. Shirley Weber, before she left the assembly and became our Secretary of State, made sure that this commission had good resources. So the State Attorney General's office is staffing it. And I'm not sure that a lot of other commissions will have the same level of staff support. So if you're going to set up one, make sure you find some money for that, because we can't do it as volunteers. It's not going to work. It's got to have some money and support behind it. So I just wanted to mention that. And I looked up the HR 40 to see there were 173 sponsors in the 116th Congress. There's only 27. I think it's 20. I've lost, I can't find the number right now, but
The number I've been given is 193.
okay, I'm trying to find, I was looking at a vote instead, sorry. Good, thank you. I wanted to know how many sponsors were on the 117 Congress bill. Thank you.
Yeah, we're aware of what California is doing. I don't know if you saw Tatiana's presentation. I'm actually, I know Shirley Weber. She's a friend and a colleague.
Right. No, unfortunately, I couldn't get in to hear the presentation.
Yeah, she mentioned Shirley Weber and her efforts as Secretary of State, but even before that.
No, it was when she was in the Assembly.
I know.
Yeah. Excellent.
Like I've known her since she was a professor.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, we're aware of that, and we can make a list of resources if people desire that. Now, I'm assuming we have about 5 minutes left now, right? And so, are there any suggestions, or do people have any proposals? Because we talked somewhat about HR 40, but what are you going to do back in your local community if there's, I know Alan mentioned what he could connect with, but what are some suggestions that people could do?
Is there any draft ordinance for a local city council that someone has introduced that could be a model?
Yes, actually, there's an organization called First Repair that was established by Robin Rue Simmons, who was the alderwoman who developed it in Evanston, Illinois. Her organization is set up to support local communities in doing initiatives, but it won't be the same in each local community, right? Her community were able to use the revenue from sales of legalized marijuana and target that for reparations. So the legislative process would also be different in various communities. But she does have laid out what does a local community have to have in place to make this type of move. You have to have understand the legislative process. You have to do the research in your local community. Some of the things that what's my friend's name, Waukesha mentioned in terms, we have to do the educational work. So the educational work means that we have to talk to church groups. We have to talk to community organizations. We have to make sure that people are having these discussions in barbershops and beauty shops. You know, that even that there are initiatives done in terms of curriculum that's touching school children, K through 12. And so how do we do these type of efforts? It has to be a massive amount of education, because the other side is also doing campaigns to try to discourage people from supporting reparations. There's even things done in the popular culture. Speaking of popular culture, can we get music that talks about that? There is some music that talks about it. I have a playlist that I use in my classes. Tatiana could tell you, when she took a course from me on reparations, and we played music before we had our conversations in class. From people going way back to Oscar Brown Jr., to Gil Scott-Heron, other artists, even contemporary rap artists. Prince made a reparations song. And so how can we include that in our education? Because we all know that music plays an important role. But let me not, and that answers some of what you're saying, Waukesha. And there are efforts going on in Atlanta, or the Atlanta metropolitan area, to make this more of a mass effort. Let me see. Are there any other suggestions that folks would have in terms of, we do need to have resource lists and I can help compile one for this organization, resource list, even educating ourselves. There's material out there we could read on it. There's actually a book, a little pamphlet on local reparations efforts done by one of the co-chairs of NCOBRA that Fatima mentioned earlier. A how-to for local reparations efforts. So there's some information that's out there already that we can access on this history and whatever. What's our time looking like?
6 minutes.
6 minutes. Oh, we have plenty of time. Does anybody else have a question or anything they would want to say? I see Claudia Perry, and before I come to Betty, said local town hall meetings and mass leadership, youth and adults. But go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, I just wanted to know for people that are following HR 40, where is Speaker of the House Pelosi on it? Because she's so important, and here we're in San Francisco, so she is our Congresswoman. So I don't know if anyone knows, has she taken a position? Because she's the one that'll push it through or not. So
I think with Pelosi and Clyburn, they have to be pushed to put it on the floor for a vote.
okay.
But with both of them, that's one place that folks can write with Pelosi and Clyburn. There's a complementary bill in the Senate. Word on the street is if it passes the House of Representatives, that the president is likely to sign it, executive order. That's what the word on the street is. You didn't hear that from me. But I'm sure your former senator, the vice president, has something to do with that probably also, right?
Yeah, okay.
And so, but we do need to make sure, I think there's some thought with Clyburn and Pelosi that it might not be the time. We went through the whole Obama administration for 8 years. That's one of the reasons it didn't get presented earlier, because folks didn't feel it was time, but the time is now. And particularly after George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, the list of names. We know that institutionalized racism is a thing. Ahmaud Arbery, we know that even though the civil rights movement was valiant and we made several changes during the civil rights and Black Power movement area, the struggle's not over and we still need to do some things. And reparations is one of the things we could do. Tina, you're muted.
Thanks. I really appreciate the discussion. I also appreciated your slides and starting off on talking about the whole UN decade. So I will definitely make it my business to keep track of HR 40 and thank my representative for being a co-sponsor. But can you back up and give us like the big picture of the UN decade? What else? Like who should we be following? You mentioned a couple of groups like December 12th, and where's a good place where we can keep up on the UN decade?
Actually, there are, and I'll put the resources, but there have been meetings from the working group of people of African descent on the decade and other activities that can happen. Here's where I think we're lacking though. And this is why I'm happy of us having this conversation today. In the United States, there's not a lot of activity.
That's what it looks like.
It's not a lot of activity happening in the United States. So this is one of the first activities that I participated in the United States. I participated in activities in other countries. So I want to thank Teresa and Fannie Lou Hamer branch for bringing this activity here. But we need to do more activities in the United States. So along with the work you're doing around reparations, can you get your local community to do a program? Can you get your church, your faith communities to do programs looking at the decade and then having this conversation, especially in light of what's happening, what happened in the last year, just us being made aware of what's going on. I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk about the decade, and then what more can we do? And the whole question of reparations could be brought in.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, everybody here, everybody on this call, we all have work we could do around this right now. Even if it's just like talking to people in your barber shop or beauty shop or your community. And I think that's what Waukesha is saying is how can we, and what Fatima said earlier, how can we take this information and make it where folks are talking about it? And, you know, we each have to be ambassadors on this question. And again,
So
we can provide some resources for information and connection.
If we all go talk to our folks, we can call you to get a speaker list.
Yeah, most definitely. I could.
Okay.
One of the things Fatima mentioned earlier, efforts in California. I was on a piece with the one of the co-chairs of Cobra, and then Akishi Taifa. We did a piece with the Japanese American community because, you know, Japanese Americans were able to get redress. And so in California, they formed a committee to write Nancy Pelosi, Clyburn, to write, you know, folks in their federal representatives to try to get them on board with this. So, you know, because again, it's not just the issue of Black people making this advocacy. We want everybody making a push around this. And so we appreciate this conversation and this opportunity. Tatiana, I see you.
Continue talking about mass incarceration and the death penalty.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue to just talk about how bias and violence was displayed in real time in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, where Judge Bruce Schroeder, he was almost acting as a fatherly figure for Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot 3 protesters military style after the murder of a Black man in Kenosha, Washington. You know, despite Kyle's clear, you know, intentions for going to Kenosha, he was actually protected under our criminal legal system. So it kind of forces us to ask a couple of questions on how we can leverage faith and justice and the power it brings for family and communities. We have to speak directly to the issues of Black people in the judicial system. We also have to understand that even though there may be a defendant that is guilty, the question is, do we as a civilized nation have the right to kill? And I just want to say something that Walisha mentioned, we should have allegiance to policies and not politics, and understanding that one party does not hold all of the answers to all of our solutions. And I'll just be happy to answer further questions later on.
Thank you so much. I need to hear from the Allens. We have 64 people back in the main room. Is that everyone?
Also, I didn't know if you all knew it or not, but the recording is paused. So I don't know if somebody paused it intentionally or not.
No, it wasn't.
I'm sorry, I was muted. How's everybody? Let me see. We got 10 people. I think we lost some, but I think we kind of. Yes, but I think we kind of got the makings of a proposal from some of our conversation. Number one, we talked about writing people in the federal legislature, House of Representatives, and that would include Pelosi and Clyburn, James Clyburn, right? So that would be one. I would just say that's number one. Number two would be the, and I could be point on is to create a resource list, and then that be distributed to the everybody who attended this meeting here so we can follow up. And that would be on, included in that resource list would be work around HR 40 as well as local commissions. And I was glad to hear about the San Francisco Commission. You know, I didn't know about that. I really learned that. And there's efforts I don't know about. I know about local areas, like as was mentioned by, I think it was by Waukesha, the South Fulton, which is a new municipality in Metro Atlanta area, has already endorsed HR 40. I know that Atlanta City Council did it some years ago, and I know Detroit City Council had some years ago. But and so that would be another area. Can we do something on the local level where we're at, whether it be on endorsing HR 40 or seeing if there could be some sort of initiative done to do some sort of repair in that local county or city. But those are the ideas I have. What do y'all think about those three things I proposed based upon a conversation we had? That would be to write the federal legislature or to do whatever lobbying, because for some people might know some people there they could go talk to, right? It might be beyond writing them, depending on what your relationship is and with folks there. But you know, but that'd be one. And then two would be the dissemination of this resource list throughout the organization. And so, you know, people could begin to read more, can know some resources they could call upon. I think someone even asked me about a list of speakers. And then that would be included in a resource list. And I could certainly provide individual speakers and even organizations to call upon. And then finally, seeing if, you know, people could at least pursue some local activity around it. Do I see your hand up, Tina? Tina, you're muted.
Yes. So I think, you know, thinking about reparations at both the national and local level would be one way to think of it, and whether we're going to be lobbying, however, it would be under general heading of lobbying. But in order to do that, we need to stay updated. So kind of a general thing is being updated about HR 40 and local reparations, and then an action underneath that, which would be, you know, contacting. I did a quick Google while you were talking. Apparently New Jersey, which is near where I am, did something a couple years ago on reparations. So yeah, I need to find out where that is. And then your second thing I'm spacing out about, but I was also going to add just about Tatiana Reese's beautiful resources about women leaders in the reparations movement, in terms of being able to, you know, educate and share knowledge of. So it seems like one of the things you're doing, you teach a course and you provide resources to groups who want to educate. So I think another action might be to create, to be able to, you know, be involved in the education. Frankly, WILF members are wonderful at education, and to be able to share Tatiana's research, I guess is the way to call it, and include that, like, sorry, I'm going to start to bumble, so I'm going to start off. But so I was thinking of the reparations as two levels all in one piece, and then kind of education about the UN decade, women leaders, And then the third one, then the other one was the one you were talking about that I'm flubbing on, but
No,
that's how I'm thinking about it.
I like that. And then besides her sharing the presentation, to have her present, you know, I think
Exactly.
would be great. If she's willing, I don't want to speak for her. And I know I have some stuff I want her to do too, but you know, to have her speak, I've known her for the last couple of years. And I think having young and new leaders and spokespersons, I think is very important for us to have. So and I certainly will support her in that work. And I forgot too, there was a suggestion, I can't remember if it was you, Tina, or someone else who brought up about the UN decade, and I suggesting we do work. So that should be tied with the local piece, that we need to do work around the local, promoting the decades in this last couple of years, of the decade.
Yeah, for example, I know that our local high school has an African American club, which so being able to reach out to the high school sponsor and to say, look, I just found out about this great thing that lots of adults don't know about it. Do your high school students know about this? And then be able to share that.
Chances are the teacher doesn't, because it hasn't been, whoever's been custodians of this haven't done the work to let folks know. And I'll include myself in that. I've tried to do it, but
it's a big job apparently to get through this this huge mammoth I'm thinking a mountain range of blockade of blocking all this information to get to us. My goodness.
Right. A lot of distractions too.
Right. I'm muting myself.
I think I see Alan.
All very good. I wanted to encourage that the initial presentation of the several slides on the UN decade, if that could be put into about a 3-minute something that could go out on the social media and be able to easily communicate it, particularly to the public schools and to the district library with its many branches. And further, Tatiana's overview of the women who have been in the forefront of the call for reparations is new. It's definitely new information for me and probably everybody else, most everybody else, and very engaging in terms of the community saying, hey, there's been something going on here. The two in Ann Arbor, our campaign has been to make the center of the city a community commons for everyone. And the African American community has its annual Juneteenth and other activities in the part of town that was primarily the African American part of town, though I'd say most people have been kind of pushed out of town. But our call is to have the African American community have its presence in the commons in the center of the city. And we've been in conversation with the NAACP and the Elks Club and different groups for Juneteenth, that should be in the center of the city. And many communities, I think, have a Juneteenth celebration, and to put the reparations question in that Juneteenth endeavor. So when we talk to the NAACP and the other African American groups, we begin to have the information about reparations merged into the Juneteenth, because that's a program that people are actually involved in. And similarly, Martin Luther King Day comes up in January, Monday the 17th in our town. It's celebrated. And that is another point where the reparations and attending to the consequences of past injustice should be part of the agenda. So I'm hoping that these gatherings of information on the previous initiators toward reparations and on the UN decade can be gotten together with sufficient haste that they can be distributed around the Martin Luther King Day holiday. And then that kick off to have that more incorporated into the Juneteenth and have it be integrated into our local community consciousness, particularly through the library and the public schools, but through all the organizations. And it should be in the center of the city, not off in the side park, important as the Wheeler Park is. Anyhow, that's, I hope these resources are very interesting and important, I think, and need to be shared. In the UN decade, people are interested in the UN decade, in the UN, but this decade has, how could it be, slipped under consciousness? So raise it up. You did beautifully at the beginning.
Thanks a lot, Alan. I appreciate it. Very good ideas. Very good suggestions. I think Claudia is next. And then after Claudia, Louise. Claudia, you're muted. You're muted.
She's having trouble unmuting.
I said, okay, we'll give her a second, and if not, then I'm gonna move on to Louise.
Okay,
here we go.
Can you hear
Here we
me
go.
now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I think you called on me by accident. I was just listening right now at what everybody else was saying, so I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, that's all right. I just, it'd been worse for me, you to have your hand up and me to ignore you. So it's all right. We're gonna move to Louise.
I probably have a very basic question because I want to know what's included when you talk about reparations, because I know there's an issue about individual wealth, but I see that unless we spend a huge amount of communal money on making infrastructure and particularly public schools. I mean, I am such an advocate that schools and schools associated with a local economic development and having communities really have control over themselves is absolutely necessary. I mean, it doesn't do one individual a lot of good to have some money if you don't have a structure that allows, tremendous health. So until you have schools in the inner city, until every school in Philadelphia is, a nice, beautiful structure, the same as you have in the suburbs, and until you could have one teacher with 20 kids instead of huge overcrowding, I don't see what progress we're going to make without really, really great education.
Very good point, and this is why I think we need to have some education around the issue. One of the articles I have my students read is from a Duke professor by the name of Sandy Darity, called The Economics of Reparations. And he talks about that if you just make distributing money to folks, to Black people, then but if there aren't certain institutional things established, then the same gap in terms of wealth will still exist. And so what you talked about in terms of not only education, but establishing economic or financial institutions in a community or that would help money circulate in the community, then you're going to have the same type of economic wealth gap. But that's, and I don't know if you caught the beginning of my presentation, that's only part of it. The money piece is, we also have to talk about curriculums, and not only curriculums in terms of teaching people financial literacy, but curriculums that make people proud of their heritage, right? Things of that nature. Right now, our curriculums are not culturally relevant. And there's a tie, studies have shown, between culturally relevant education and academic performance. And so, you know, there's a whole lot of things, and this things that we have to look at. Reparations is not just, again, a check being given to Black folk. And again, that would be the lowest form of reparations in my estimation. But there are several things that have to happen. We talked about restitution, compensation, rehabilitation. We talked about satisfaction, which are non-material things that are done, as well as putting in measures that will prevent this type of harm happening in the future. So, and it's a process. It's a thing that happens over time. I see reparations as a policy, not as a one-time event. And a series of policies, really. So,
could I point out one connection? It was pointed out the huge military budget. We're talking about the nuclear ban. I mean, that's, you know, it's the military industrial complex controlling everything. So we all have the same enemy of, you know, getting that money into human needs.
Here we go with interconnections again. You know, there's so much is spent on defense, but less on human development, and then particularly handling past injustices. So no, that we agree on that, most definitely. Let me see, Claudia, is your hand up now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. In COBRA, for example, lists 5 areas of injury.
Very good.
And education is certainly one of them.
Right.
Now, how we initially move with this process, some of us are actually moving on it already, but once it becomes law, is that there will be hearings in communities all across the country from people of African descent who are part of the injured party. This, one of the things that people may, in some cases, be missing is that reparations is also a self-determined policy. In other words, one of the things that went wrong was, I feel, with civil rights, which was a wonderful move. But one of the problems was the same people who contributed to the problem were controlling the process. So what we're looking at is, once the commission has been formally established and the hearings are held, then we're able to sift through the data that's collected, the voices of pain that have been really listened to for the first time. We can attack the kind of thing that the former speaker was just talking about.
And so I will put those 5 areas of injury from COBRA in the chat. I mean, they deal with even questions like self-determination. And if you go back to the Durban Program of Action, that was one of the things that stated that people have the right to self-determination to determine their own destiny. So when we talk about questions like reparations, certainly oppressed people, those who've been violated, need to have a voice in what those remedies are. They can't be imposed on them from up top. And so, you know, thanks for that. Claudia, are you Fatima?
Yes, I don't use Claudia. It just happened to pop up on the screen.
I saw the name, and I didn't see you. But yeah. I mean, we go way. She and I go back to the late '70s working together around these very issues. So it just shows the continuity. Let me see. Did I miss Alan? Did you want to say something else, or was your hand just still up?
One other pebble in the pond. You said culturally relevant,
right?
And that just struck a chord. I was an old friend of Bob Moses when he went down to Mississippi, sadly deceased.
Right. No doubt. They're one of our heroes.
He began the Algebra Project,
right?
Which made algebra culturally relevant. It really engaged young people in how to work with numbers. And then you talked
but that's what we're talking about. And so if we have to relook at curriculums. And
Yeah.
one of the things that Bob Moses and some of the people in his cohort talked about is many of the schools in our communities are what we call prison prep, or what they call prison preps. And so but we want to get back to these and I see Teresa has just joined us. And since she's here, I want Tatiana to tell us what we have so far.
Okay. I'm suggesting that the contact we made with the people who are carrying on the algebra project to see how the financial literacy connects with actually looking at the mathematics of reparations in the various forms.
Well, Alan, there are a couple of hands up. So if you could mute yourself for a minute, that would be great.
I'm done.
Teresa, your hand's up. So did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. I think there's someone else with a hand up. So if we can hear from
all of them are down now, if I'm looking at the screen correctly.
Oh,
is there
great.
anybody who hasn't spoken, whose hand was up? I think we called on everyone.
Oh, that's great. Because in 8 minutes, we'll need to move back into the main room. But the one thing I wanted to point out is that we have 3 years left on the UN decade. That's 2022, 2023, and 2024. So one of the things that I hope would come out of this was a kind of strategic outlook on where do we want to be in 3 years. Oh, there's plenty of time to work on that. But 3 years, time's up. So December 31st, 2024.
I think we lost Teresa. You muted yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't accomplished a lot over these 7 years in the US. I know that a lot is going on in Brazil around housing. And so internationally, a lot is going on. But our focus for the purpose of the Fannie Lou Hamer Branch Human Rights Conference is the US. So I just want to make sure that your 3 action proposals reflect the fact that we have 3 years left on the decade.
We did address it. I don't know if it will be to your satisfaction, but we talked about doing local activity around it. And we tied that to the local work around reparations. It might even be an introduction to a conversation on reparations. But I think it was Tina who brought it up in our previous conversation. And so we included it in our 3 proposals to educate people around a decade.
The other good thing to know is that the Advancing Human Rights Committee of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, US section, has a subcommittee on the UN decade / reparations, which is in part why we want to make sure that the subject made it into this conference. I am the convener of that subcommittee. And I had asked you to come speak to the subcommittee, but you were busy at our last meeting, Akinyele. So that invitation is extended, and I will give you the date. It'll be sometime in January. We usually meet on a Friday evening, and I know the upcoming meeting is at 7 p.m. on a Friday evening. And I'll get the date for you from my calendar before we end the conference today.
Very good. And there was also a suggestion of us distributing or me creating a resource list to go out to the membership. And so in the information won't just be information on reparations, but it will be on the decade because people wanted to know where they can get updated information on this. And so that will be part of it. And I'll be able to, we'll just have to, after this is over, look at my date, and I'll be committed to doing a session, if not in January, as soon as we can.
Well, the other thing is that people should work to learn for themselves as much as possible. If you Google UN decade for people of African descent. You'll see what they're doing in Nova Scotia. It's happening all over the world. So please use your talents, WILF members, to Google, just Google it. And you will see that Africans have found their way into every part of the world. And this UN decade is addressing Africans in all parts of the world, not just the US. So that's important to know, but our focus is on winning reparations in the US. There's a bill that John Conyers introduced every year since 1989. Well, Sheila Jackson Lee has revived that bill, but every time it comes up, Nancy Pelosi says no. She told John Conyers no every year, every single year that she was the speaker. So when John Conyers became head of judiciary and he promised us he would get it out of committee, she told him no. So the Democratic Party has to be exposed for the fact that Black people vote 90% in that party, and we can't get that HR 40 passed. So that is an action that has to take place. Cory Booker has put it in the US Senate. He has the companion bill. So we have two.
Teresa, I think we only got a few minutes left, so I wanted Tatiana to review some of what you mentioned. We talked about, but I want her to review what we had.
Akiyele, you're gonna have 15 minutes for you and Tatiana to put your heads together during the break.
But so I wanted her, you know, to read them, so we made sure we got the group's input. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so what are the three action proposals you came up with?
Tatiana, can you read what we have?
Yes, so our proposal one is creating our ability to write to our legislation body. So we answered who we should include. Does your current representative support HR 40? Send certified mail or return receipts so that inquiries and requests don't get lost or ignored. Creation of a unified email draft and phone script, and communicate with Pelosi and Clyburn to urge them to bring HR 40 to the floor with attachments to directly to their websites and a brief link on how to write to your Congress around HR 40. Proposal 2 is a creation of an educational resource list or guide, which would include a workaround HR 40 and local commissions and initiatives, a shareable resource list that will help spread knowledge around the UN decade and the reparations movement within the United States, a 3-minute informational video on the UN decade that will be available for folks to use within public and private schools and probably accessible on YouTube, a video overview of Black women at the forefront of reparations movement to upload onto YouTube. And there's links and resources starting with National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, also known as NCOBRA, and reaching out to organizations like the Algebra Project, who are currently culturally relevant and are doing the work of repair. And we also added the first repair organization by Robin LaRue Simmons. And our third proposal is city level actions. And that would consist of hosting listening sessions with the community to engage in conversation around reparations, invite speakers with expertise in reparations to facilitate the discussion, understand the belief systems of the various groups working on reparations, such as NCOBRA and ADOS, ask questions of the representatives of the groups you connect with to identify the ideology of the group and any previous work that they have done, and compare notes to find out which organizations are a good fit to volunteer with or support. And that's what we have.
Well, it sounds like a lot more than 3, but when you get to speak on it at 4 o'clock, you can put the 3 proposals in the chat so that people can hear them as 3 proposals.
Awesome, will do.
If she showed it on the screen, it's under 3 major subheadings, so.
Thanks, Tatiana. That sounds great. I love the way you're going. Can you include the ideas for around the Juneteenth and MLK in that last one? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can add that.
Thanks.
The Juneteenth, I think there might even be a national demonstration that some groups are calling for on that day. So that really ties in.
Cool.
All right. Well, you all have been a good group. I think we're through with time, and thanks for all the suggestions people brought to flesh out even what we brought it to you initially. I really appreciate that.
You're great.
Oh, thank you. And thank you. Now, Tatiana's great.